Just as there's people still coming in the doors and finding their seats and checking in, I'll do the housekeeping. Welcome to St. John's. If you've parked in a car park space out the front or the side that's labelled church, and you've not got, and you're not on our electronic system, you're in danger of the wardens coming round and finding you and with great delight charging you. So if you've parked in a bay marked church and you don't normally, then give me a shout, because I'll add you to the system. Out the front, there's an hour, I think, of parking, and you can cross your fingers and pray and hope for the best. And then for future reference, the church car park behind the Paul Carroll's shoe shop and modern eatery is open we've opened it on Thursday evenings, so you can park in there. The emergency exits are here and here, and hopefully the microphone situation this week will be much improved on last week's. But if you were here last week and weren't able to hear properly, then it is now on YouTube. So and the link is on our Facebook page. So and if you can't find that, then again give me a shout, and I'll send you the link to last week's introduction. Other than that, I shall hand over to Sue to do proper introductions. Sue.
It's my pleasure to welcome Rabbi Freilich to speak to us this evening. Can you hear me? Better. It's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Freilich to speak to us this evening on how to live well from a Jewish perspective. Rabbi Freilich was, after serving as a rabbi in the Kingsford Maroubra congregation in Sydney, the chief rabbi of the Perth Synagogue of Western Australia for 30 years, from 1988 to 2018. He's now Emeritus Chief Rabbi of WA, and from 2008 to 2012, he was the President of the Federal Association of Rabbis in Australasia. And in 2005, he was awarded an OAM for services to the Jewish community, as well as promotion of interfaith relations. So we're very privileged to have Rabbi Freilich here tonight, and I've heard him speak on a few occasions, and I think you're in for a treat. So thank you, Rabbi Freilich.
Okay.
There we go.
Welcome everybody, and it's lovely to be here, and thank you, Sue, and thank you, Patrick. Can I just say, firstly, I've been given guidelines as to how long to speak tonight. So I'm talking to you for about 40 minutes, and then apparently there's about 20 minutes of questions. So I'm looking forward to your questions as well. And it reminds me of a rabbi who went on and on and on and on, and the congregation was getting very, very edgy and very disinterested and shuffling around. And the rabbi then was getting quite annoyed, and he looked at them all and he said, "Look, I don't mind you looking at your watch occasionally, but I do mind you taking up your watch and rattling it to see if it's still working." You won't have to do that tonight. You won't have to do that, I hope. I've got a lot to say, because after all, Judaism is one of the oldest religions in the world. In fact, the oldest religion in the world. You know, it's actually 5,000 years old, to be quite frank with you. And I'm going to discuss the lifestyle which has kept us going for so long. Can I firstly say, and I'll just sum everything up very quickly at the beginning even, there was a person who asked his spiritual leader, "How do I die as a good person?" And the spiritual leader answered and says, "By living as a good person." Because the greatest gift that we can actually leave behind when we leave this world is having a shem tov, which in Hebrew means a good name. If we leave a good name because we've been good in this world, then indeed we've achieved something in this world. Because, let's face it, and I think you can only really understand how to live in this world if you understand our purpose in this world. What is our purpose in being here in this world? And I'm going to share with you Judaism's view as, firstly, what is our purpose? And if we're achieving that purpose, then we have a feeling of contentment and happiness. So what is our purpose in being in this world? And as far as Judaism is concerned, we are actually, as human beings, made up of a soul and a body. God, that soul that we have, according to Judaism, is actually a part of God. Part of God. What makes us live is that soul that each and every one of us have within him or her. And the body is just really a shell to keep that particular soul down in this earth. The body is earthly, we have a soul. And the main purpose of our lives is to make that soul contented. Why did God put us down here? In order to bring godliness to the world. As God gives, so we should give. Because the soul is only contented if it gives over. If it actually gives of itself to others. Then you feel contented. If it's all about me, there's no contentment. When the soul is giving out and radiating out to others as God, as I said, it's part of God itself, then indeed one feels a certain sense of contentment. Listen to this, and I always put this to my congregation. You know, you can go out for a wonderful meal, physical meal at a restaurant, and you'll enjoy the meal, and you'll probably think for a few weeks that was a good restaurant. I had a really good meal. But if you've done something for someone else, if your neshama, we call it the soul, has actually done something and acted in a godly way by giving to others in this world, you'll never forget that. You'll feel a contentment inside that will never go. It will keep the glow. It'll make you feel contented. It'll make you feel you've actually got a purpose in this world. So, before I start, I've started already, but the truth is, if you ask our purpose in this world and you try to fulfill that purpose, then that is the true way to contentment and happiness in this world. Not so much the physical, but the spiritual, the part of God within us. Now I'm going to tell you, as far as Judaism is concerned, how to achieve that, or how do we achieve that. And we achieve that by our relationships with others. In fact, let me tell you something. God prefers our relationship with other human beings as brothers and sisters more than he, as far as Judaism is concerned, more than he expects our actually dedication to him. Now, I'm going to explain to you how we know that. How do you know that? Is that just we make that up? I'll tell you something. Here's something very interesting. If you look at the Bible, the first two generations were the generation of the flood, Noah, and right beside that in chapter 11 or chapter 12 of Genesis, we read of the generation of the Tower of Babel. You've heard those two things? Noah and the Tower of Babel. Now, in the time of Noah, people were violent to each other. It says, if you look at the English, there was violence in the world between human beings. What did God do? God destroyed that generation. He had to restart. He destroyed that generation. When it came to the Tower of Babel, which is next to it, where people were trying to actually outdo God. Try to outdo God. They were building a tower saying, we can outdo God. What did God do? He just made them babble. He didn't destroy them. And the rabbis learned from this that God really has more empathy towards how we actually behave to each other than even to him. And the giving is really by giving over to each other. Now let me say something. Now I'm going to tell you, firstly, our particular way of life is all orientated towards that. Now, I'm going to tell you, 10 Commandments, for example. If you look at 10 Commandments, you'll see on one side of the 10 Commandments, those laws which are between ourselves and God. You know, no idol worship, the second 10 Commandments, the second half of it, is also how we actually behave to each other. And they're right beside each other. Right beside each other. And why they're right beside each other rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 going down? Because God says, yes, well, these laws are between you and me. But equally as important, if not more, as I've just shown, are those laws how we treat each other. Interesting enough, you look at the 10 Commandments in that way as well. Why weren't they just listed down in one line? No, to show between human beings and our relationship between God, equally important, equally important. Now most people, let me say, there is not in Judaism no word for religion. No word for religion in Judaism. In Hebrew, no word for religion. You know what religion is? It's called, if you're religious, you're called dati, which means law-abiding. Law-abiding. Because in the Torah, which is the Old Testament, as you know, the 5 books of Moses, there are 613 laws. 613 laws, not 10. By the way, 10 is just a summary of the whole 613. There are 613 laws. Now, all those laws, you say, well, that's very ritualistic. Very ritualistic. In fact, I'm giving a talk on this because I'm talking about on Tuesday in the city, I'm in Wembley, in Wesley Church, on Jesus the Observant Jew. Because Jesus did not abrogate any of this. He was Jewish. The interesting thing is that if you look at those laws, all those laws are orientated towards how we treat each other. And I'm going to give you the following examples now. We have a Sabbath. We're told to keep the Sabbath day. Every Friday night as the sun sets, we as Jewish people can't use electricity, can't use any form, can't travel, we can't get in our cars, we turn off our televisions, we can't answer the phone, all these things. And you know why? Because on that day, we're supposed to sit around our tables with our families and our children and talk and relate to each other and go to the synagogue and talk and ask people, how was your week? To be able to relate to each other. It may seem to you, this is very ritualistic. You know, it's law. But these laws are for a purpose. These laws are to actually make us aware that we're supposed to be empathetic and understand others and have a chance to be able to speak to others. If you look at the Sabbath as well, and interesting, by the way, I want to point one thing out. Where human life is at stake, you can use any of these things because human life is first and foremost. If God forbid somebody was very, very sick, they'd be taken to hospital, you can actually say any of this. Human life is first and foremost. Secondly, what does the Sabbath do? Beautiful. All technology is closed down on the Sabbath. Closed down. Why? And here's another thing. Because we have to ensure the environment is kept pure. Can you imagine if every human being in the world had one day of the Sabbath without all the technology, without their cars, without this whole situation of the environment would be solved? One day a week. one day a week, and you'd actually save the world from all this pollution. I've often thought of that. Every person kept a Sabbath. If every person kept a Sabbath, families would be kept together. You'd be able to talk to your children, your grandchildren, around the Sabbath table. It doesn't have to be a Friday. If you're Sunday, it used to be. Families even on Sundays used to sit around and discuss. I mean, it's a different world today. But these things were ways, a lifestyle that actually uplifted our souls. Another thing which also about the Sabbath, which is really very beautiful, we create things. We actually cause, throughout the week, we're working and working and working and working. And then it comes to a day and we say, all those things that I've become a slave to during the week, turn it off. Turn it off. I've now got to see what I'm alive for. Why am I alive? To be able to enjoy my family, to be able to enjoy others, to look heavenwards towards our Creator, to actually think of things which are the most important things in our lives, really, which really appeal to our souls, as I said, the godly part within each and every one of us. Now, another thing which the Sabbath tells us, and by the way, when God gave the Sabbath, there's a legend that God said, I have a gift for you, which will give you the best lifestyle. It was from the Talmud. I give you now a gift, Jewish people, that is a gift that will indeed sustain you. And that gift was the Sabbath. It's a legend, but it is the gift that actually sustains us. But something else. Did God really have to rest on the seventh day after he did creation? Does God need to rest? Why did he rest? And he told us to rest. You know why? Because he had just created human beings for the first time on the sixth day. And the reason he told us to rest on the seventh day was to actually meditate on that creation and say, we have all been created by the one Father, by the one God, each and every one of us. So we sit there and we think of that on the Sabbath. If we came out of the Sabbath without any inspiration at all and without sort of feeling to ourselves that this has taught us a lesson, it's no use. We go out of the Sabbath and we think, you know what, I've just rested and it's made me aware that God has created each and every one of us here and everywhere else in the world. No matter what nationality, no matter what religion, no matter what, all of us. And it makes us better people for the next week. We go out this week and say, my brothers and sisters, all these things are due to the Sabbath. And as I said, it doesn't have to be a Jewish Sabbath. If only people would do, whether it was Sabbath or not Sabbath, this particular, just one day a week, would solve many of the social issues in the world, would actually help with the environment, and would make us all of us in a much safer place, to make the world a safer place. That's one thing. Okay, the Sabbath is a very important lifestyle for the Jewish people. Now let me tell you, again I said that there's no word for religion in Judaism. The word is dat, which means law. Those 613 commandments which I mentioned are called mitzvot. I know that Sue has knowledge of Hebrew. Where's Sue? They're mitzvot. Sav means a line. What does it mean? It's a line that joins us to God. Each of these, that's why it's called mitzvah, sav. And here's another one which I want to tell you is extremely important. And that's the laws of kosher. Kashrut. You heard of the word kosher? This is kosher. It actually means fit. Now, I'm not going to go into the laws of shechita, which is ritual slaughter, etc. There's a whole debate on that, which we say is really very a painless way. But that's debatable between various people. But I'm going to say what the laws of kosher actually started and what they mean to us. Listen to this, very interesting. You know, we were not supposed to be meat eaters, any of us. If you look in the book of Genesis, what does it say there? It says we were supposed to only have of the fruit of the trees and of the seeds thereof. We were supposed to be total vegetarians. And if you look in chapter, and I think it's chapter 6 or 7, chapter 9 of Genesis, it actually says there, interestingly enough, that after the flood, when all the trees and vegetation was killed off, Noah says, God, well, can we, he asks, you'll see in the Bible, Genesis, can we eat meat? And God says to him, yes, you can eat meat, but only of those of the lowest form on the ontological scale. In other words, those animals have higher intelligence, you're not to eat from. So therefore, you know, we as Jews can't eat pig because a pig actually is a very intelligent animal. So to show that we keep away from cannibalism, we only eat those animals which really are not regarded as the most intelligent, like a sheep, a cow. So if we have to have meat, that's the only ones we have. That's how the whole laws of kosher came. And the whole thing is, and the whole reason for it, is not only should we show our respect for our fellow human beings, but also for every creature in the world. And let me explain to you how that is. Let me explain to you. You know, it says when you feed your animal, Asev Basodacho, the animal in your field, and then you feed yourself. If one is actually at a meal table and you see the dog, your pet, wanting food, we are told in order to really exercise that godliness within us, first consider the creature before yourself. In fact, if you look at the marriage between Isaac and Rebekah in the book of Genesis, what happens is the Eliezer, who's the servant of Abraham, says, the sign I'm going to see that Rebekah is the right wife is if she feeds my camels before she feeds me. So in other words, we are taught as Jewish people, always, not just human beings, but every creature that God has created, we are supposed to show respect for and humanity to. There's another particular lifestyle law which I'm going to share with you. And that is that certain times called Taras HaMishpacha. Some of you wouldn't have heard of this. There are certain times of the month where marital relations are forbidden, depending on the menstrual life cycle. Certain times they're totally forbidden. And what is the purpose of this? That men show a respect for women, that they're not just sexual articles, God forbid. You are to actually communicate with your wife or your partner on a emotional, intellectual level. And therefore, from these particular Taras HaMishpacha laws, we actually stem from this our respect for the opposite sex. So all these things, you may think, that's a law, what's this law? But the law's there to actually help us in our communication with our partners, communication with our animals, our communication with God, our communication with each other. It's all there because of our relations with those things which surround us. Now I'm going to share something else with you. A number of things. You know, we pray 3 times a day. 3 times a day. Usually I be at the synagogue now praying the afternoon service because it's still light outside. But you know, the word to pray in Hebrew is lehitpalel. Now, the word lehitpalel doesn't actually mean to pray, although that's the word they use. The word lehitpalel means to actually look inside oneself, to judge oneself, lehitpalel. Because prayer is not just about asking God for this and asking God for that and asking God for this. Prayer is not that, as far as we're concerned. It's actually every day examining ourselves to see whether we have achieved what we should have, whether we have extended godliness in the world for that day, thinking to ourselves as we're praying, have we actually achieved what God wants us to do? And that is prayer, which I think is everybody needs each day to meditate. To meditate to see whether their souls are actually carrying out their purpose in this world. We do that every day, every day. And on top of that, when we do pray for those things we want, for example, you know, health and the world being in peace, etc., we don't just pray, if you look at it in the plural, we don't say, God give me this and God give me that. All of our prayers are in the plural because it shouldn't just be about me. It should be about all of us. When we say, Refueinu Hashem Elokeinu, please Hashem, heal us. Even though you might be sick, you want to be healed, you don't say, please God heal me. Refueinu Hashem, please heal everybody. I want to be included in it, but it's not just about me. That's also something which is really for our lifestyle to make us appreciate others, giving of our souls to others, as I said, in a godly way. Another thing which I also wanted to tell you, it's very interesting. You know, Jewish people are called, actually came from the tribe of Yehuda. You know, one of the sons of Jacob was Yehuda, Judah. That's why we're called Jews, Yehuda. You know what the word Yehuda means? Yehuda means to be thankful, to thank, Yoda, to actually give thanks. Because every moment, we as Jewish people should feel thankful and grateful and count our blessings. Yehuda, that's what we're named after. And therefore, every food we eat, to appreciate things in this world. People think this takes for granted. They think they're entitled. People think they're entitled. No, we're not entitled. So everything we eat, we make a special blessing. Thank God, King of the universe, who has given us this. When we take an apple, an orange, whatever we're taking in our foods. Of course, you know, everything we eat. I'll tell you, there's once you've actually said one blessing over one thing that has the same blessing, you don't have to say everything for the other blessing. Otherwise, you'd be sitting there not eating at all. But just blessing. But the truth is, what does it teach us? It teaches us to count our blessings as we should. Jewish lifestyle. I'm going to tell you something else. Every morning, you know, there are 3 Jewish symbols. You see, sometimes we need reminders. We need reminders of what, you know, I wear this skull cap, yarmulke, it's called a yarmulke. The interesting thing is that it's not mentioned in the Torah. It's not one of the 613 commandments to wear a yarmulke, by the way. It's just a tradition. And what does Yarei Malka mean? Yarmulke, Yarei Malka, so it means reverence to the king. In other words, always realize that there is a higher creator above us. And if we realize something above us, if we realize Yarei Malka, that there is a higher creator above us, we act accordingly. So it's symbols to keep us in check. And I think everybody needs symbols. Sometimes, you know, if you want to remember something, you do something to I've got a sign here to remember. Well, we Jews have 3 basic signs from the Torah. This is not one of the signs, but it's there as tradition to wear this. But there are 3 basic signs. I'm going to show you something. And Jesus wore these, by the way. He became bar mitzvah in Capernaum. okay, in the synagogue in Capernaum in Galilee. These are called tefillin. There's a little box that goes on the head every morning when I'm praying, introspective, and one on the arm, tied on the arm, and you pray with these every morning. Tefillin, they're called. They've got 4 parts of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses, which actually tell us of how our relationship to God should be, how our relationship to each other to be, how we should actually care for the underprivileged and those people who mightn't have what we have, to actually care for others. It's all in here. And every morning, put this on, put this here, and meditate on what's in them. In other words, respect for our fellow human beings, helping our fellow human beings, love of God, and also, love your neighbour as yourself. Interesting, if we talk about love. So this is a sign every morning. I go away to my day after putting these on, meditating and thinking on these things. Signs. Sometimes we need signs just to remember. Even if you wear a cross around it reminds you that there's something spiritual, that you should be leading a spiritual existence. You need these things sometimes, because we're just out in the mundane world there, and even while we're on the mundane world, we need those things to show there's a higher purpose in life. Otherwise, life is mundane. The thing which I wanted to tell you, interesting, it says love your neighbour as yourself. Love your neighbour as yourself. Okay, let me tell you, and one of the great rabbis said that is the foundation of the whole Torah, of the 630 commandments. Love your neighbour as yourself. Although, unlike Christianity, we actually still keep the rituals, as I'm just showing you now, which actually remind us and help us to keep that principle. Because all of the rituals I'm showing you, even the Sabbath, is aimed at that love of our fellow human being. But we want that to actually help us remind us to do those things. Now, there is a discussion in the Talmud. This is a Talmud, and the discussion is, one rabbi says, love your neighbour as yourself as the foundation of the whole Torah. The other rabbi says, no. The foundation of the whole Torah is the following verse. The whole following verse. And what's that verse? And the verse is, it says that God created us, chapter 5 of verse 1 in Genesis. This is the book of the generations of Adam in the day that God created human beings. In the likeness of God, he made them. He said that should be it. Because you know what? If love your neighbour as yourself is the main principle, it's your neighbour you've got to love. The one who's near you. That's not supposed to be the case. You're supposed to love the person even's not your neighbour. In other words, love the one who is like you, near you. So the rabbi said, no, that can't be it. The true principle of these laws should be that each and every one of us is created in God's image. And nobody is more important than another, and nobody should be looked at with more favour than another because they're your neighbour. So it's interesting. Everybody takes this, love your neighbour as yourself. What a principle. Well, let me tell you, according to the Talmud, that should not be the main principle, because it does not. It really aims at one type of people, your neighbour. That shouldn't be it. Shouldn't be it. All of us, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what religion, no matter what background, no matter what social economic background you have. No, we are all one. We are all one. So that's another thing I wanted to say. Now, another thing which I noticed that Sue wrote said, what is our relationship to law? Let me explain something here. There is a principle in Judaism called Dina de Malchusa Dina, which means the law of the land is law. The law of the land is law. In other words, as Jews, if we're living in Australia or wherever we are in the world, we abide by the law of the land. We abide by the law of the land because, we're very fortunate to be able to live in these countries. So in Judaism, if you're living somewhere, you abide by the laws of that land. However, if a government was not elected by the people and was a tyrannical regime, that actually imposed itself, or if a government was such that they, for example, stopped the laws, or they stopped you going to church on a Sunday, it doesn't affect anybody else. It affects your relationship with God. That is not regarded as a proper government. We're talking about a government that is democratically elected by the people, a government that allows your freedom of religion, as long as it doesn't, God forbid, contradict the, or is cruel or whatever. But that type of government, we are supposed to obey 100%. I saw in the letter I got from Sue that discussed, relation with government as well. Government. Now I'm going to share something else with you, which I feel is also an important point. The Jewish people have often been looked at as though, well, we're separate. We like to be separate. Nothing is further from the truth. Let me tell you that when Abraham, who was the first Jew, Abraham was actually when he was arguing with God about Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah? They were, and they had to be destroyed. And he says, if there's 10 people there, but toch ha'ir, in the middle of the city, will you still save the city? And God says, if I find 10 righteous people, but toch ha'ir, in the middle of the city, then I will save it. Why did it say betoch, in the middle of the city? Because as far as Judaism is concerned, if you want to have an influence and you want to actually bring goodness to the world, you don't separate yourself. Betoch ha'ir, you actually should be an example in the city rather than separate. So if you want a lifestyle where you feel satisfied that you're doing something properly and you genuinely are contributing, you don't separate yourself. Betoch ha'ir. And maybe that is why sometimes people say, oh, Jewish people, they're so involved. For their numbers, they're too involved. Because that's our philosophy. You betoch ha'ir, you actually contribute to the society in which you're in. You bring over goodness, you bring over what you can, your talents that God's given you to society in general. And you feel satisfied that way. It fulfills you. And talking about community generally, I want to say something here which is particularly interesting. Religion is not so much about faith. Religion is more about community. I think it's very important, and we believe it's important as Jewish people, that people belong to a congregation, church, a mosque, synagogue, whatever. Why? Because if all of us need a sense of belonging. When somebody has a birth or somebody's, God forbid, sick or whatever, they come to the synagogue and people go up to them, or somebody, God forbid, has a bereavement. People go up to them, they welcome them. People feel they're part of something rather than alone. They're not alone. So that is also an important feature, to actually, people should belong to a congregation, because it really helps you. It does help you. And helps others as well, because you interact with others. Everybody needs that. So I say religion can be, of course, it's about faith, but it's even more about community, So therefore, I'm going to say to you, Sabbath, how we treat all of God's creatures. Also, how we treat each other in gender, which I explained. We look at each other intellectually and emotionally, not just about physical. How we actually should participate in prayer, to introspection, and to actually think to ourselves, are we fulfilling what God really wants of us in our neshama, in our souls? Because I told you that's part of God. Again, also, are we actually being part of society, but in the midst of a city, contributing to the environment around us? Are we doing that? That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. And are we part of a congregation where we can feel like family, where we can celebrate our good times, where we can feel not alone in our bereavement? It's important. We all need that. We all need that. So summing up, and I don't, you're not rattling your watches yet to see whether they're working. How long have I been speaking for? I don't even know. Have I speaking 40 minutes? That's good. Okay. All right. So I could, there's much more I can say, but I wanted to keep it to the 40 minutes. I like to be, so I don't want to see people rattling their watches. But these are things which I think uplift us and make us feel whole, make our souls, which we have inside, feel whole. And as I started off, if you want to die a good person, live as a good person. Ashamed to have a good name, because let's face it, and I've done many funerals as a rabbi. 45 years I was a rabbi in Sydney and Perth. Let me tell you, I've never heard a eulogy where people talk about a person and say, they drove a Rolls Royce. Their business was fantastic. And their bank balance, never heard of it. What do they say? He was a good family man. He was a good human being, or she. He or she was a good human being. He or she was a good family person. He or she really gave of themselves to others. She contributed to others. And that really is the essence of life and the essence of a good life. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Freilich. We have some time for questions now, so if anyone would like to ask a question of the Rabbi, now's the time to do it. And I'll run around with the microphone.
Anything? Yes.
You've said that in Judaism, the soul is considered to be part of God. What exactly do you mean by that? Can you?
Okay, I've got stuff. Well, let me tell you that, as you know, in Judaism, there's no form. God is divine energy. Those people who imagine God as a being with a big beard, etc., sitting there, that's not how we see God. I mean, children might see God that way. We see God as divine energy, invisible. It's the force that actually runs the world. And how do we live as human beings? Part of that divine energy is actually making us live. Part of that divine energy is within us that causes us to live. You didn't have the divine energy, your body just would be flesh. So that's what I meant. And that divine energy, we believe, God, is giving, and therefore what we have of God within us is only satisfied if it's giving, rather than taking. You want to be kept fit, Sue? Sue? Good. Exercise also is very important.
Your opening sentence about leaving a good name, I'm just wondering if you'd like to make a comment on Shakespeare, who said, the good that men do oft is interred with their bones, and the evil that they do lives long after them. And I just wondered if you'd like to make a comment.
Okay, sorry, I always forget I've got this up there. Unfortunately, well, Shakespeare, the evil we do lives on after. Well, the way to avoid that is by doing no evil. I mean, the truth is, I don't think, not as far as I remember, when I hear people today talking about somebody who has been generous and been a good person, they're still spoken about today in reverent terms. You know, so I wouldn't actually agree with Shakespeare and 100% with there. But unfortunately, you're right. When they do evil, it's also remembered, because you see down the line, in fact, sometimes more than even the good. But the good is remembered. The good is remembered. I don't know, I've never heard where good is just wiped out. You know, particularly children and grandchildren in the communities in which they actually lived. I mean, we remember people who passed away 50, 60, 70 years ago, the good that they did. And we still talk about it. There are books written about it. So, you know, but unfortunately you're right. Shakespeare was right in the second part. Unfortunately, the bad makes a good story, so they keep that going as well. Any other questions?
Both Christianity and Islam derive from Judaism. They both have a foundation in the Old Testament. Why do you suppose that separation occurred?
Separation, you mean?
The separation from Judaism.
Christianity separating from Judaism.
Well, what I said before was both Christianity and Islam have a derivation or derived from Judaism. They both have a foundation in the Old Testament, your Torah. Okay. I was wondering why that separation occurred. Why did those two religions develop?
I understand the question. Firstly, with Islam, that came after Christianity as well. So you know, one can only speculate. I don't know. I'm not going to answer Islam, because you have to ask the imam that's coming for that one. I couldn't actually answer that. But I'll tell you about Christianity. And if you, I'm advertising this, if you come Tuesday night at Wesley Church at 7:30, I'm giving a whole talk on this. Jesus the Observant Jew. Jesus did not, and I'm saying this now, and I'll prove it to you on Tuesday night. Jesus did not actually want a New Testament. The reason for that is because the Romans at that time, because what happened was, this is my Master of Arts in Sydney University on the rabbinic background of the rise of Christianity, exactly that. They wanted to portray Jesus as somebody who was removed from his Jewish roots. They wanted to remove him from his Jewish roots because if they're going to follow him, because after all there was the revolt of the Jewish people against Rome, the authority of Rome at that time, and therefore to try and remove Jesus from this, they actually changed many of his sayings. And later, well, he did not, and they changed many of his sayings. Not only that, you know, they put this in the New Testament, said, oh, he said this. But I'm going to show you on Tuesday night, what he said was really according totally to Jewish law. In fact, he was more thorough in his observance of Jewish law than many of the rabbis at that time. But Paul, and I'm not going into this, I'm going to say this on Tuesday night, Paul had a problem with the Jewish people. Paul was Jewish, of course, Saul of Tarsus. He had a problem with the Jewish people. And the problem was, and this is our take on this, the problem was he was not actually seen as fully Jewish, according to Jewish law. And this caused a bit of a problem. So it was really Paul that started the New Testament, not Jesus. So if you want to see it, it's a political situation. Jesus was a fantastic Jewish person. And let me tell you something, if he were alive today, I'd follow him, still remain Jewish, but as he did, as he did, because he was totally right in what he was saying. I'm going to talk about this. I don't want to give my lecture away, but I'm talking about this on Tuesday night at Wesley Church. No, Wesley Church in the city. Okay. You'll hear more. You want to go? Yes.
I have a question to do with contemporary life. I don't really want that unless people can't hear me. Oh, I see, sorry. I have a question to do with contemporary living. And I ask the question because it strikes me that whether we talk about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all the great world religions, whatever we include, they're a living legacy of antiquity, is the way I perceive it. That's not a criticism.
I couldn't quite, what was the word you said? I didn't hear the...
Sorry. Is that any better? No? Yeah, okay. I'll do both maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. My interest is contemporary living, today.
Yeah.
In the here and now, as we find ourselves, which is different to the world that Jesus lived in, or Moses lived in, and people of antiquity lived in. Because the contemporary world, although there are still people that are essentially the same in their inner world, in their cultural life, and in their relationships with each other, these principles endure. But we live in a transformed world now that is not a repetition or a continuation of the way things were. This has happened in the environment. The environment has been changed. It has not been supported and sustained and conserved. It's been manipulated. It's been raped. It's been transformed into something that is not repeating the past. It's new. And that is our challenge today, is how do we live now in the world rather than refer wholeheartedly to the past? How can we translate that to now?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've addressed these issues tonight. In contemporary society, you have the Sabbath of old, yes, but that applies to today. In fact, more so to today than then. You need rest. You need to meditate. You need these things today more than then even, because then it was a less wild world. Today's world is much faster, and you need these things, as I mentioned, more today than you did then. So really they are relevant to every society. It depends how you apply them. Yes, you write one thing. You apply them. Well, as I said, the Sabbath should be applied to today, because I think we all need it. We all need it for our family's sake, for understanding who we are, and have a day of rest where we turn. And by the way, interestingly enough, in the old time, it was one should not light fires, light fires on the Sabbath, etc. That was brought to contemporary times. What does it mean? It's not the physical energy of lighting the fire. It's creating light. And how do we do it today? Turn on the light switch. So you don't turn on the light switch on Sabbath. So it's been brought down to show you don't turn on the light switch. Help the environment. Don't use the electricity. So it has actually been brought to modern terms. And prayer has been brought to modern terms. It's a meditation, which everybody needs. I meditate 3 times a day. I'm in the 60s, so we used to have transcendental meditation, in my old hippie days. I'm still doing it today. And talk about my old hippie days. I thought the 60s. I thought the 60s were great. Some of you here would have been brought up in the 60s. It was a time of love and peace, true love and peace. You know, but in my retirement from the rabbinate, I've just brought out a pop album which I have made. It's called Earthly Haze. Earthly Haze. It's called Earthly Haze. I'm not here to plug this, but it's going on Spotify next week. But and we're just selling in the bookshop. The money, if it makes any money, all of it's going to the homeless of Western Australia, and also to stem cell research. I'm not making a cent from it. I just wanted to actually, because I always wanted to make a pop album, always. And all of this is about how to live. One of the songs says, what is life? The meaning of life. Is it just earning our... All those interesting thoughts on life and about the environment, about spirituality. It's all in there. Proper 60s type stuff. And there it is. I've always wanted to make a pop album, and I did it when I retired. I mean, they find it rather odd, from chief rabbi to recording artist. It's in there. So I'm just telling you. So I'm putting it very in a contemporary way now. In fact, I played it for one of my members of the congregation, and he said, "But Rabbi, that's all your sermons." Anyway.
Any more questions for Rabbi Freilich? Last chance.
Going, gone.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Freilich, for your talk. It was just lovely. And you've given us a real sense of the ethos of Judaism and what's at the core of it and what it's all about. So thank you very much for doing that and for coming along to speak to us.
Well, I want to thank you, Sue, for inviting me, and I want to thank you all for listening to me. To be quite frank with you, to actually give a talk like this, it takes listeners and speakers. So I want to clap you too. Thanks very much.